Hello, hello, Heal with Gold. How are you all? I am so happy to be here. Really happy because it has been a tough week, and those moments that I share with you, I take my mind away from all of the problems, the health issues, and I just get to be here and spend this wonderful time with you. And by the way, my room here, my kintsugi room. Hi, saludo, aloha. My kintsugi room got taken over. I'm gonna share with you. Look at this. Can you see? There is a hospital bed. Yep, my room became my husband's recovery room. So I'm here sitting on a makeshift little desk so I could still be here and have this quiet place and spend time with you. It has been such a roller coaster this past 10 days, but we are so blessed and we saw so many miracles. And for anybody who is here, I see as you come in, please tell me that, who are you? Because I can't see your name. It's not like Zoom. So I don't see you unless you say hello and salute. I know you're here. And whoever else, please say hi. But I left a 23-minute IGTV. I did a live there yesterday. And I have to tell you something. I have never received so many messages to a video that I did on IGTV. I cried. A lot of people cried too. And I'm going to share something with you. I decided to let my husband hear it. I never let him hear what the videos that I made. And I gave him my phone and I left, and then I come back to the kitchen and he is crying like a baby. And I felt like, oh my God. And he was so emotional. Thank you, Salud. He was so emotional. He loved the messages that I had left there. And so if you want to hear more details, please go there. We're not out of the woods yet, but he's doing progress, a lot of progress. And what can I tell you? He survived this very dangerous surgery. So we're lucky and we'll go day by day. But now I don't want to delay anymore. I have here two amazing, amazing women, Amy and Evelyn. You know, one of the things that I love them so much is because they don't care about what the establishment set up in their field. They make their way, they pave their way. It's like girl power, and they're going to share about their background that's very unique because they come from the finance world into OT and brain and science and neuroplasticity. And you would never expect two strong women from this background to come and really pave the way. But you know what? Sometimes you need people with a fresh set of eyes that have an opinion, are not embarrassed to share this opinion. They don't want to conform, but they want to innovate. And that is very exciting for all of us. So I'm going to bring them on. We're going to do a show with two wonderful ladies. And at the end, you're going to have an opportunity to ask questions. They'll introduce themselves a little bit better. And then we're going to go into our conversation. So don't be shy. Make comments. Share the videos from my personal page and from the YouTube. You want to be able to get maximum visibility for this kind of shows. So without further ado, here is Amy and Evelyn. Man, hello.
Hello.
I am so happy. One thing that I wanted to share with everybody about the two of you, and I think I mentioned that to you, Amy, and Evelyn, if you didn't hear that, then you can get to hear that now. But we have done a few clubhouses together, and I've noticed how you are towards everybody, towards the people that you bring on stage, towards me. How validating you are from people's opinions. Sometimes it's not even such a massive new comment, but you make everybody feel so admired and appreciated, and you make everybody feel so smart. And it's such a beautiful trait. And I just want to commend you for that because I love doing the shows with you because I leave feeling like I'm $1 million. So
Well, thank you for that. I think the person who recognizes that is the person who does that as well. Because I can say that I feel the same way being in your presence, Mary. And the communities that you create are so powerful. And so I'm listening to you when you were speaking about your husband, and I wrote to you in the private chat. I was getting emotional listening to you because you share with us your real, your who you are. You show your light, your essence, and I think that what you're recognizing in us is something that you yourself do. So it's something that really comes full circle, and
Thank,
we're excited to be here. So
thank
thank you
Yes.
for having us.
Sure.
Yes.
So I want the two of you will take turns. You can choose who goes first, who goes second. But tell me a little bit about each one of your background and then how you joined forces, what you started, what you're doing now. And then we're going to talk about the kids and anxiety and a lot of very important things that I'm sure a lot of people are going to learn from and put it into good use.
Okay, Evelyn, why don't you start?
Okay, hi. So I'm Evelyn, and I actually started out when I graduated and started college. I actually went a totally different route, and I started out as an accountant. I think because I wasn't 100% sure about what I really wanted to do, and everybody in my area was going into the therapies, and I've always loved science and numbers, so I went that route. And when it was time for me to I got a job in a big six firm and I was about to take the CPA exam, and I realized that I really wasn't feeling fulfilled doing accounting. And even though you can work with people in accounting, obviously, I just felt like I wanted to do more and help people more. So I remember when I had to tell my parents, okay, I'm shifting gears and I'm changing my profession. But Amy and I have really, really supportive parents. They really felt like whatever it is that we wanted to do, we should be happy doing. They always raised us to be educated and open thinkers and really love what we're doing. So I got a lot of support, and I switched gears, and I became an occupational therapist. And it's funny, I started my professional life working in the geriatric population. So we spoke about the brain. I specialized in individuals who had strokes and TBI, and I was fascinated by neuroplasticity and how much progress we made. I mean, it was slow, but it was always steady. So I started out there. I always started out with the 99-year-olds. That was my oldest patient, and I worked my way down when I actually I worked in a nursing home in an acute care setting, and I got laid off our entire department besides two people, which was very difficult, but it was the impetus for change for me to start in pediatrics. And I went into pediatrics, and tried everything. And Amy, who will share her story, she was also in pediatrics at the time, and basically at some point we started our business together, where we saw that we needed to sort of like shift gears a little bit and find a different way of treating children because we weren't getting the results in the conventional ways. I'll let Amy pipe in a little bit, and then we can talk about our journey
Yes,
together.
Fantastic. But I just want to say something. You know that now it's Stroke Awareness Month. I don't know if you know, but when you are affected by stroke, you know that it's Stroke Awareness Month. And there's a lot of people in the group who's either they're caregivers or they themselves had strokes. And anything neuroplasticity is, when you mention that, for anybody who has had a stroke or a TBI, our ears perk because all we care is how can we get the brain to rewire itself so our loved ones can regain functionality, if it's physical or if it's speech or whatever it is. So we'll definitely want to hear a little bit from your geriatric background and the strokes background and so on. Amy, go ahead, introduce
so
yourself.
yeah, I will. I just want to just follow up and piggyback a little bit on that, neuroplasticity, what's powerful about it, and we'll definitely talk about it, is that it's a concept that works across all spans, whether someone has a stroke or doesn't, but how much more so when there's damage. We've seen in science over and over again, there's a lot of hope. So we'll definitely get into that. So appreciating that and for your community. My story. So I was studying finance, but I did grow up with a lot of sensory integration issues. My sister watched me. She was my witness. I suffered a lot with sensitivities to touch, tactile sensitivities to taste. I was very anxious, but nobody knew because I am, I guess, extremely intelligent. I was a high IQ student. I had top scores. Socially, I was appropriate, and I was able to fake it. And my family, which my sister mentioned, my parents were very supportive. So if I had difficulty falling asleep and needed a heavy cover, they gave it to me. If I wanted my chicken to be separated, my mother was very, very smart in how she handled me. But I knew from a young age that my quality of life was poor. And I knew that it wasn't a psychological issue. I had no trauma. There was no event. It wasn't like I was neglected. It was very, very hard for me to deal with myself. And honestly, even though I was studying finance and I loved it, I wanted to go to occupational therapy school to treat myself and heal myself. So I completed my broker license. I was working on Wall Street, and at 21, I graduated from downstate, and I did heal myself, and my quality of life shifted and changed. And my sister can share with you that things really developed for me. I was able to be more natural. I wasn't so nervous. My anxiety was alleviated. I'm sitting now in a room. If I showed you, there's a little bit of a mess. When I was growing up, everything had to be just so. Now I can deal with a little uncertainty, with a little, you know, disruption in my life. It's not so overwhelming. So I would work on Wall Street, and every day at 4:30, I would be heading back to Brooklyn. Markets close at 4 till you get out, and I would work with the children, and I would do a lot of the evaluations. After 9/11, where I had my own story, and one day we could talk about it, my life was spared. And I should have perished with some of my friends, but I didn't. And it was a wake-up call for me. And I realized that although I loved Wall Street because it was great for my mind and my spirit, I had a lot more pleasure working with the children. So I kind of said goodbye to that world. And I still trade. I'm still involved in it, but not full time. And this became my passion. And together with my sister, just to kind of bring the stories together, I started doing evaluations, and my sister was working more with treatment. And sometimes I would do an eval, and then she would get the case on her load, and we would start talking and communicating. And we would follow up on these children, and we'd find sometimes that they weren't getting the results that we wanted long term. They had improvements, but they didn't last. So we actually took time off, and we started studying on the brain outside of our scope of practice, not just OT. We wanted to understand, why are they making improvements, but why isn't it lasting? And we started looking about neurology and speech therapy and all these different components on normal development. And that was a big change for us, where we changed our entire practice. And we can delve into that a little bit later, but we kind of became trailblazers in how we approach anxiety and processing delay in children, which many people don't know, and occupational therapists can actually help. And we can prevent and make these changes long term without psychological input, just through the way the brain and body communicate. So that's really where we're at. And that's really what's unique about our journey, because we kind of questioned what we were doing and what we had learned in school to see that it was nice and making progress, but children would have residual effects or wouldn't last long term. Do you want to add anything to that, Evelyn? I don't know if
I was just going to say that, our journey, and I think the fact that we, are trying to be successful in helping as many parents and children as we can, it also pushed us to also form a foundation right now where we want to educate everyone, parents, teachers, caregivers, people who work with children, on how to prevent these things from happening to begin with. So I think that's like our long-term goal and our baby, so to speak, so that we can, I feel like the more you understand the connection and the hope that there is that you can prevent things, it just empowers everyone to do as much as they can for children and even for yourself. Because I find that a lot of what we do, we specialize in working with children, but like when we work with the parents, there's so many changes that just carry, it's like a trickle effect, that the parents themselves say, they find something out about themselves and they're able to help themselves. So it's just, something very satisfying and something that is our goal. And I guess I'm very grateful that I get to work with my sister and that we're able to do what we do.
That's amazing. So how about you sharing with us some examples of certain things, so maybe somebody who's listening can put that into practice in their own families with their own children.
So like we can talk about, let's say, a typical child that will come and kind of explain like what we would do with a parent and what's something that they can probably do out in the audience. Sometimes you'll have children who, like myself, are very smart and capable, but are too overwhelmed by internal emotions, or highly sensitive, very emotional. They'll cry when they're not supposed to, or inappropriate, or they take things too internally. It's not that they're highly sensitive, but they ruminate. They will get fixed on things. It's hard for them to shift gears and to change modalities. So when we evaluate a child, we will try and determine three components of their brain profile. What is their sensory integration? How are their five senses working? The ones that we know, our vision, our sense of hearing, smell, taste, and gustatory, what's the other one? Tactile touch. And then the three systems that are hidden. What is their sense of proprioception, which is where they are in space physically? Their vestibular sense, their sense of balance, and interoception. How are their internal muscles receiving information? So we look at their sensory profile, their reflex integration profile, which a lot of your stroke victims and for anyone who is out in the audience knows, a lot of reflexes come back sometimes when we have brain injured individuals. But children actually have reflexes, and if they don't go away, they present sometimes in a neurological um, impairment, but it's not like as significant as not having motoric components, but emotionally they may have issues. So we'll look at their reflex profile, and then we'll look at their neurochemical releases. How are they giving off dopamine, cortisol, all those stress hormones that we have and develop? They're actually developing from a young age. And again, a lot of these children are smart. They don't qualify for services. They may have gone to a psychologist or a behavioral therapist. And what we do is we will teach physical movements that will help reorganize the way these systems and these reflexes are working and the way these neurochemicals are released. And if I have to give like a general profile of 100% of the clients that we have that have this kind of profile, one of the systems that gets impacted a lot is the vestibular system, which is our sense of balance. And something that's critical for these individuals is to have full body exercises. Children, if you want a quick fix, if I had to like put something out there, of course it depends on the profile, but yoga, full body movements, things that have to do where you're actually giving input to the body can help alleviate these symptoms. They may not treat the child, they may need more help than that, but it's definitely something that can help compensate them. I started just going with that,
Yeah,
but
so I
yes.
was going to add just to that, that's something that I think is important for people to know. A lot of parents don't know, and I think even related to ourselves as adults, that when you have some of these issues that Amy just explained, like having problems with your vestibular system and your balance, it is so connected to emotionality and the way that we're feeling and the way that we're related, and even to anxiety, because anxiety is a feeling of being in a fight or flight or just not feeling very comfortable. So and I think that's very surprising sometimes, particularly for parents, to hear like, oh, they're coming off the bus and they're having a full-blown tantrum and they're totally fine, let's say at home. What just happened? And a lot of times something that is physical that we're feeling can trigger so many emotional parts of our brain that create these like responses in us that create fear, that create anxiety. And there's the movements that Amy was talking about can sometimes help with that emotional piece when we're trying to do all these cognitive things and they may not be working. And I think a lot of our parents themselves, because one thing that we found interesting is that sometimes parents themselves have a lot of the issues that their children are going through. So we have some parents that are like, it resonated so much with me because I also get very emotional when I come home from, let's say, a drive at home and I'm seeing a therapist or I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And just to understand that the connection between our brain and our body in terms of what we're doing creates certain loops in our brain that make us behave the way we do, and that there is stuff to do to make that change and be better.
Wow, that's very interesting. Very interesting. What about all of the anxiety that's happening now because of COVID with the kids? A lot of it's a little bit more situational, right?
It is. It's interesting because I think that, the anxiety today with what's going on with COVID and children even who don't have any issues that are neurotypical are having and creating that anxiety that are also feeding off of what we are feeling ourselves as adults. So it's something that I think like they've been going through this year. And even now, there's more anxiety, I feel, as we're getting back and shifting into a normal routine because they're so used to being at home, doing things a certain way. I think a lot of parents maybe found out about a lot of their kids' issues that opened their eyes to things, but it even created anxiety in children that never had that because of what their parents were going through, what they're going through. They're nervous about getting back to school. And I think it's a real issue that teachers and parents need to be aware of in order and talk about, not to pretend it's not there because it definitely is there.
Just to contribute a little bit more on that, in November, we were interviewed for an article on anxiety, and now it's been 6 months later, and some of these children are actually coming into play. And I remember when we were speaking about it back then, we were saying we don't know what the effects will be. We're anticipating it because we've seen through COVID, like my sister mentioned, parents are not co-regulated, and they themselves are dealing with stresses, and the children are picking up on that. Children are sponges to our emotional beings, especially those who may have any kind of highly sensitive nature or any kind of integration issue. So now that they're back in school, there are new issues that are coming to the forefront where their anxieties are different than what they were prior to COVID. They now have anxieties over the simplest things of even just adjusting to the idea of being in school, just being back in school. Did they miss their grades? Will they be able to take tests in the same way? Their learning is more challenging. Social situations. So many of these young children have missed critical periods of social skill learning, and they're not able to regulate themselves. So a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old who missed about a year's worth of school also missed about a year's worth of social development, and that triggers anxiety if there were other children in their environment who did have older siblings and did get to promote those. So there's new tensions and a lot of school hesitancy. Children don't want to go to school. That's another thing that's been popping up a lot. And when they go to school, they're silent, they're quiet, they're not verbal. So there definitely has been an impact. But frankly, I think we're going to see the bigger impact years down the road. I think we don't even know yet what the full impact is. On a positive note, children are resilient. So as long as we can have educators who are positive and optimistic and take into account that they need to be a little bit more patient with the children, then we'll be okay. As long as they don't put that pressure of where they are based on their chronological age and they look at their emotional and developmental age, we'll be all right. And it's the message that my sister and I are really trying to put out there for the schools that we consult, because they have these standards that they still have to keep. They still have to teach the math and the reading. And frankly, our perspective is don't worry about that as much as the emotional stability, because if children are not going to get what they need emotionally, they're not going to be able to function. That higher level cortical thinking is not going to be able to come because they'll be stuck because of their emotional turmoil, which I think as adults we can relate to as well. And we've all experienced that this year, I think.
I think that my anxiety is going to be once I have to start getting dressed from the waist down.
There you go.
Like, no, I'm totally fine dressing only here up.
I think we all have that.
I don't know. My kid was home. This whole year she's been homeschooled, and next year she's going back, and I don't know how she's gonna get dressed. It's very interesting because I noticed something that as a parent, and I have an interesting situation, right? I have a kid who's homeschooled because we couldn't have her exposed to COVID because my husband is so ill. I have my husband who was so sick, so I'm being a caretaker, and she's witnessing all of that. And then there is my own desire to hide certain emotions so that everybody remains functional individuals and not affected by it. And then how it affects me from trying to bottle everything and come out as always positive, but having my own personal fears. And I learned personally from my whole experience is that the more I internalized and tried to hide, the more I brought anxiety onto others. And the moment that I decided that, well, it's okay if sometimes I cry. It's okay if sometimes I express my fears and I say why I'm afraid of this and why I'm afraid. Once I spoke more about it and presented myself more vulnerable, I find that my kids were more stable. So it was a very interesting, it was the opposite of what I thought it needed to be. I thought that I had to be that strong rock, nothing affects me. I'm going to be there. I'm going to show you that you have no reason to be upset. But they understand what's really going on. And probably I was being weird when I was trying to hide what I was feeling.
You know, it's funny because what you're saying is so true because I think number one, children do feel things and they acknowledge things. And when they see our vulnerabilities and they see that we're able to cry and we're able to say we're scared, I think it validates, first of all, what they're feeling inside. Because if you present yourself as someone who you can't cry, you have to constantly be strong, we are modeling for our children what they need. It's funny because we once learned from someone who, a mentor, about how children from early on, they are, like Amy said, a sponge. They're seeing what we do, and that's how they create their own schemas in their head in terms of how they need to survive.
Oops. We lost her mid-sentence. Okay.
I'm here. So by crying, by showing them how we feel, I think it gives them a certain sense of security. It makes them think it's okay, it's normal, and it allows them to show that emotion. And on the other hand, I think it's so important for us because I totally relate to what you're saying about having your own fears. And, I also have someone I have to be extra careful with in terms of keeping myself healthy, not to expose them. And it gets so enmeshed sometimes, things that we're feeling, that if we don't let go and we're not able to let it out, I think it translates into everything that we do. And fundamentally, you can have something going wrong and it has nothing to do with what your fears are just because you haven't released that and let it go. So I so relate to Mary what you're talking about. And I think it's so important that we take a moment to say it's okay for ourselves because number one, I think you feel better afterwards. And it's like, I feel like this is an onion. You let all these layers out and you finally get to like just be, even if you don't feel so great afterwards and you still have those fears, it's validating for you as well, I think. So yeah, and I think our kids need that. In fact, I remember there were some people who were not telling their kids, they had grandparents who were not well. Some people were like, unfortunately, some people, they lost loved ones and they would try to ignore it or they felt it. They knew what was going on. They just needed sometimes you to talk to them and say, admit what was going on.
Yeah.
And I just want to add to that, just for the neuroscience part of that, when we are having an emotion and we don't regulate it or express it or internalize it, our body, our physiology will shift. It's just the way science works, that those releases will come in a different way, whether we're physically not feeling well, whether psychologically we get into an emotional state, and there has to be a release. And something that we always tell our parents is the idea of surrendering is something that when you surrender to the emotion and you allow yourself to do that, your physiological shift, like my sister said, allows your children to feed off that because they are in that growth stage where those systems are developing until they're 16 when the first part of prunicity happens. So until the age of 16 and then until 25, they are still picking up on those sensitivities. And what a good lesson for our children to see that we're emotional at times and we can verbalize and express that. And then they see us recover. We don't stay in that state. And if we do have a situation which is maybe perhaps depressing or overwhelming, then we show them that we're getting the help that we need and recognizing that. That's a powerful statement that children should recognize that mental well-being is not something to be a negative situation. Mental health is health in the same way physical health is. And this is something that's a great lesson, I think, in some ways for our children to see. So I think it definitely relates. I relate to what you were sharing. And I think it's great that you were able to do that for your family.
But it's very interesting because when you look at social media, for a whole long period of time, it was all about fake. It was all about this perfect story that people wanted to portray. And there are still a lot of accounts that are like that. But they saw a shift in which people started to being vulnerable, sharing their disabilities, sharing their weaknesses, their pain. In those accounts, if you go look at the engagement, you can have an account of somebody beautiful that only posts trips and beautiful clothing, and maybe there's a lot of people there following, but the real true engagement is found on the accounts where people are being vulnerable and themselves and authentic and just, real about their situation. And I think that people are developing stronger and more real friendships and relationships with those people because I think we're thirsty for that. We're tired a little bit about presenting this front of perfection. It's exhausting to pretend. So exhausting.
So you're talking about a topic that's really dear to us because, and we're both smiling here because we are on this journey. We're newbies to social media and to Facebook and to all these things like lives and filters. And, like we had a social media manager that showed us how a filter works. And we're like, but that doesn't look like me. And she's like, no. She's like, and I'm like, oh, okay. And then I remember before this social media, we had someone else who was managing our account. And we had a presentation where we have hundreds of people coming usually. And in this one, there were only 14. And she's like, you can't post that. You can't show a picture. We'll angle it so that it looks like there were more. And I'm like, why can't we say that we didn't do so well? And it was okay. Like, why can't we share that that's part of the journey of having a business, that you don't always have a sold out event? And the concepts that we were hearing is that it's not a good impression. It's not good for your marketing. And we're like, that is so far from what I think the world needs. And our podcast, by the way, was created off that. It's called Quiet the Noise because we were hearing what people assumed we had to do, how we have to look, how we have to present. And you're hitting such a good point because when we're honest about what's wrong, what's not so pretty, how if you take the grass is greener on the other side, it's dirt. There's dirt on the other side. It's okay, but the dirt is flourishing. It's what creates growth. That's where you get life from. This is the story. The success and the beautiful external component is not a reflection of what purpose is. You can be beautiful inside and out. And these beautiful ladies on Instagram are also beautiful on the inside. But if we're working so hard to show that impression of something that's not true, where is the reality? Is social media now entertainment? Has it replaced television and movies? That's fine. But for us to recognize how we can connect with people and learn and grow from these accounts that truly, truly are giving and sharing, that's what matters. I want my children to learn that. I grew up with the phrase, don't judge a book by a cover. I really believe we have to bring that back. Like, is that not an idiom that the children are learning? I don't know.
I also think that I think it puts a lot of pressure on the people that are working so hard to give a certain look or a certain representation of who they are. And you become something that you really sometimes are not. And there comes a moment where it is exhausting, like you said, and it takes a toll on you knowing who you are, and you become less authentic to you, which to me is the most damaging thing in the world. Forget about who's looking at you in Instagram, your followers. It takes a toll, and people say they have a hard time connecting to who they are and what their dreams and what their values are. So
I'm going to tell you something because I have on Instagram, I'm only there as Mika Fashion, right? It's my business. If you look at my videos there, I'm wearing a beanie. I have no makeup, and I have never used a filter in my life and never will. You know what? My whole thing is like that. If I fake it online and then you meet me and you pass out because suddenly you see the fat and the wrinkles, then that's not a good thing. I prefer let me look horrible there, and then when you look at me, oh, she's not so bad in real life. She can clean up, It's a better impression. I don't know. The whole concept.
And what about what we're teaching our girls? What are we teaching our girls? What is it? What are they growing up with that they have to have this persona? Now, I do want to say that if someone is feeling insecure and they need a filter, that I'm not judging them. It's okay if they need that. That's fine if that gives them security. My problem, or not my problem, my concern is like what my sister said. Are we losing our identity in that? Is this so important? I mean, we once had someone who didn't want to ask us to be on their podcast because they didn't have enough followers. They thought that we needed like a certain amount because we have a large following for our webpage. And I'm like, this is not what matters. It matters to me what the message is, what the knowledge is. If we're looking at metrics, if we're looking at these fake personas, If you're in fashion and you're a model, great. But if you're doing something for a different purpose, like you're creating fashion for women, and you were to be fake, you know how upsetting it would be for me to buy a dress that was tainted with coloring, or makeup artists who might use filters to make the person look more beautiful? How insincere, how terrible for the consumer, how terrible for the human to not be connecting to that. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just getting passionate about it. We're learning that this is the way it goes, and we're like, we're gonna break barriers here too. Why can't we talk about the trueness of what our journey is? And if someone doesn't want to, respectfully, I don't share about my children on social media. It's my choice. But at the same time, if I wanted to, it's also my choice. I mean, I have my own thoughts on that, but I can't judge someone for doing it or not doing it. But we do, I think we can judge or be concerned about a world that is trying to fake it, to make it. Like, I don't get that.
Right. No, I'm with you 100%. My kids don't even have social media. And they're even the older ones, I didn't let them when they were young. And I told them, when you're older, you can choose to have it. And when they were older, they said, thank you for not letting me. I didn't waste so much time. Now, my little one, she texts too much, her friends. But there is this fear of, you're not going to school. What is your social interaction?
Right.
For me, and I'm going to tell you something, when I tell my kids, why don't you call your friends? Why don't you call on the phone? That's weird. They tell me it's weird. You don't call, you text, because you have time to answer. And it's just like a completely different generation in how people communicate. And I mentioned here one other live that I did, another video, that I was happy with Clubhouse, because it's bringing back the ability for people to have communication, listen, speak. And the people that don't get to go on stage, they can't even speak. So it's teaching them to just be listeners. And I think that this is powerful, and it happened and it blew up because I think that we were thirsty for that type of communication. And
human respect.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I see that at home, we have to implement, with our kids, we have to implement those same rules of, sometimes you just listen. Sometimes you don't need to respond to everything. You can be quiet until I finish my thought process, and so on. But I think that being vulnerable with our emotions, I noticed this last IHD that I laughed, I got emotional and I cried a little bit. And listen, I'm wearing my pajama top, I'm unscripted. I go when I want. I don't care what I'm wearing, and you can go and you can watch it. And you will see that I'm like, even like the thumbnail, I'm making like a funny face. I didn't even change it. And I'm saying, I'm a fashion designer. I shouldn't do that. And then I said, but am I a fashion designer? I don't see myself as a fashion designer. And I'm like, I see myself as somebody who wants to bring healing to the world. And I'm promoting it through my fashion, but also not through my fashion, through my words, to my sensitivity and what I want to share with everybody. And so sometimes, it just comes out very naturally.
I think it also makes what you're doing and your product all the more powerful because they see who you are. And I think that if people can really see that your product is not you, you are who you are, and your product is an extension of who you are. And if you're able to represent, I think, that in an authentic way, in a real way, that's where people connect to you and to what you have. And I think that that's something that we need. We need to do more of that. Like you said, for me, I have a very hard time with the not talking, the texting. I mean, Amy knows, like I still get on the phone and I call someone and I spend time. And you know what? I don't have the time. I'm sometimes surprised by how we're very quick. We live in a world where everything's instant gratification. You get a response right away, but you don't get the response in the same way as when you pick up a phone and you talk to someone and you say the how are you and you hear the voice back. I think, I get concerned about this generation that we're not going to have as much of that. And our children, I'm nervous about the relationships that they're going to have later on, how much this created in terms of our relationship building when, we didn't have phones at that time. We were talking. We were sitting out on the stoops. We were playing in like, now you see everyone, they're on their phone. They could be in the same room and they're texting each other.
just to like build a little bit on this, I had a friend who was saying that, yeah, when I fight with my spouse, we take it to text. And I was like, wow. And she's like, no, it's been a benefit because there's no tone. So I said, that's great, but don't you think you should learn how to communicate with tone and learn how to maneuver out that? Your children are going to start relationships and there won't be tone. Like they're going to say, oh, wait, I'm sorry. Let's go take it to the text. It's a frightening thought. We did a parenting article on screen time, and the first part of the article blew up because it was about the brain and what happens. The second part of the article was practical application on how parents can help children maneuver through this world of technology. And the responses to that one is, it's too difficult. It's impossible. It can't happen. And we were giving them very positive. We're not into like, you doomed your child or anything like that. We were telling them there are ways to slowly learn these skills. They're parenting skills, they're relationship play skills, social skills. This is missing in our children. And what will be of our leaders? What will be of our creators? And the identification that they need to present something in a social media way instead of inner development is frightening. That they have to be developing in a way which is only one tone. No one writes letters anymore. There's no letter writing and putting your letter in the envelope and sending, with putting a stamp on and putting it in the mail. I still do that every so often. It's part of my gratitude practice. And I find that it's very healing. And science has proven, by the way, that when you longhand your ideas and your dreams, that's when your brain triggers the parts of creativity. Children are not getting that experience anymore. And we're going to be missing out on that later on. We're going to see these effects later. And yeah, someone flashed about family dinners. 100% family dinners. There should be no phones. Restaurants, all the ladies taking pictures. Forget the pictures. Just sit there, enjoy the moment. Okay, I'm again very passionate about
it. It ends up being in here in your memory, which is even better.
And I was going to say something, that the phones became almost like the note card. When people say, can you write a note card? It's going to be the exact same thing. Can you sometimes pick up the phone and call somebody and just say hi with your voice, with your emotion? There's so much connection that comes through the voice and communication. I call people, I write letters, I mailed a form to a doctor's office. They said, you can fax it, you can email it. No, I want to put a note to, for the doctor, and I want to send it by hand, like a gratitude.
Right.
People
we think it's going to come back. By the way, that's what we're hoping for.
And I think that the fact that people who get these handwritten notes, the fact that some people are so like, wow, you sent me a note, you wrote something, it invokes, I think, in that person the receiver, such a good warm feeling that sending a text does not do. So that whole emotional piece of it and the gratitude, and it's just, I think it awakens something that's so necessary in us that many of us are not getting enough of today, that helps us feel good. And I think also when you feel good, it's a trickle effect. It makes you do something else for someone else that makes them feel good. Maybe you'll write a note. And I think we need a little bit more of that in the world we live in. We're not getting that.
So true. I want to hear from you a little bit about that article that you wrote that had 5 million? How many?
Yeah, there were 5 million. Yeah, we had about 5 million views, 200,000. It's still being commented on. It was written in 2017, and it's 4 years later, and we're still getting a lot of feedback on it. It's still being used as a reference. I do want to have a disclaimer though, and say that I'm grateful for technology because it has allowed us to spread knowledge, awareness, automation. We're not so busy doing things because we have technology. Right. But it's just, this balance is more of a counterbalance. I think that if you have to have that exposure, there have to be measures in your mind on how to not stress about it, but relate to it. But I'm sorry, regarding the article, yes, you have a question? Did you want us to talk about it?
So first of all, I would love for you to put the link to where the articles are so the people in the group can read it. Sure. But you said that the follow-up article had some techniques on what could do. Can you share with us 1 or 2 tips that you would say that would be vital for us to implement at home?
Sure. So I would say that based on what we were talking on our previous topic, we basically, the second article, just to give a little bit of the explanation, we basically went through different age groups and for each age group, what parents and caregivers can do to help that particular age group in terms of screen time. Again, we really strive to do this, make it very real and doable, even though it is hard. No judgment. We are all using, like we said, technology, but when we talk about things like making sure that your phone has a particular place and it's not, let's say, by the dinner place, or you have a station where everyone basically charges their phone so that it's not in your bedroom, things like that, particularly for children, because if we're modeling, we have to model what we want them to do and what we want them to see. So if they see that we are able to shut our phone and, like, when you go to the dinner table, you put it on the side, they will hopefully do that as well. So to have that respect and boundary of knowing where the phone has to go is one tip.
And then we also spoke about physical movements that parents should be doing with their children before and after screen time. When a child's in front of a screen, the reason why they're relaxed and calm is that their vestibular and visual system that travels on the same track is getting stimulation. I'm sorry, their visual system is getting stimulation, the vestibular system is not. So what happens is they get into this zone and they get a dopamine release. And when the screens are off, they either become hyper or highly sensitive because they're not resetting those pathways that were firing for the period of time that they were in that screen mode. And the screens are different than the days when we were growing up with television. Currently, the screens that are being created and developed have technology that creates more of these loop responses in the brain. So our suggestion is that if you do need to allow your child to do screen time because for some reason you're just slowly desensitizing them, make sure to have physical movement before and after. We talk about that in the article. We'll definitely give you the links. And just to also share with you, the general rule that we would have is any child under the age of 2 should get no exposure to screen time. No FaceTime, no internet, no phones. In my house with my children, everybody knows until they're 2, there's no exposure. I remember my son when my daughter turned 2, we're like, what do you wish for your sister? And he's like, I'm so excited she gets to see a phone. And like, 'cause he was trained that way. And to be honest, my daughter knows how to use a phone. Her brain development in technology world was fine. I don't know any child who has a hard time learning how to swipe or turn on a phone. So if you're nervous that they won't be, in tune to the technological developmental milestones that they need, they'll pick up on that pretty quickly. So don't worry.
And if I can just say, like, even today, we're dealing with a time where we aren't seeing many of us still our loved ones. So if you are exposing your child to that, like, engage with them. Like, if we're having a conversation here and there was a child, I would, like, repeat. I would look at the child. I would, like, make it more real in the sense that you're talking, you're hearing things. You watch something with them, you talk about it. Maybe you get up and you move. The more you do, and the more you make it an experience versus two people watching the screen, the better it is. It's a little bit like when you watch a movie and you talk about it afterwards, right? You have, I love this. Today I find we don't talk about it as much. We talk, you engage, and that becomes more about what you saw and who you were with versus, oh, I was watching it through a screen.
So, it's so interesting. I started a new thing with my youngest that every Saturday night we binge watch, really, because
Okay.
we multiple NCISs. And so we watch together, and she doesn't even bring her phone into the room. And obviously, we are watching, so we're on the screen, but it's a regular sized TV, and it's our thing. We have popcorn, and we have our drinks, and we talk in between what we thought about the show, and even during, who do you think it was, the culprit, and it becomes an interactive time. And she doesn't bring her phone into the room. I have my phone usually on silent, but if my husband calls me, I have to be on call. And she doesn't like it when I pick up to check, because she knows that this is our time, that there's no TV, no, we're together watching TV, as opposed to I'm by myself looking at my own screen, or she looking at her own screen.
And I think you're bringing such a beautiful point here, because when we're talking about this, we shouldn't be creating that it's a bad thing necessarily. You see, for example, my sister and I grew up with a television in our home, and we had allowances that, you know, you're able to watch. My husband grew up in a home with no television, so he told me how he used to sneak off to his friends to watch. We're not trying to create, it's like with food, you know, you don't say it's bad, it's good. It's about what is that experience. And here what you're describing is a positive interaction and response. You're not zoning out, there's an engagement. Like even it's not even about the content so much about what we're watching, it's about the experience in it, like my sister said. So I think it's beautiful what you shared, because it's an indication that, again, it's not about just the visual stimulation that's coming, which we speak about. It's about that component and what's going to be the everlasting mark. Your daughter is not going to be just thinking about, or your son, it was your son, I'm sorry, I apologize, your son.
Daughter.
It's not, it was your daughter?
Daughter, yeah.
Okay, your daughter. Okay. It's your daughter is not going to be remembering necessarily that movie down, you know, in 20 years from now, but she'll remember the experience with her mother. That she'll remember.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I make a very big deal that this is our thing, and I don't even love it, but I love spending time with her, and like you said, it's the experience of being together. But I worry very much, especially this kid has the phone more, and it's more, but because of COVID and because of being home, I wasn't as strict as I was with the others.
So we all have this issue across
Yeah.
the world. And this is a true issue, even within my own home, because they were forced to have virtual simulation. And the stress that parents had created, they themselves were not able to take care of themselves. So the television or the social media was a way to get that time. Again, children's brains are very plastic, so we will be able to shift that. And we have to be respectful to ourselves first. Before we put down these strict rules or guidelines, we need to know to do self-care first before we try and push our limits.
So I have one more question before I let anybody, if anybody has a question, to also chime in. How are we going to move from COVID times to non-COVID times? I think that by next school year, every kid is going to be back in school. How do we navigate all of the tension and the anxiety when we as adults are also experiencing, businesses were affected, relationships were affected. I mean, many homes, parents are, at each other's throats. How are we going to move to normalcy, and how long is it going to take to achieve it?
So would you like to start?
No, I was going to say, I think it's a great question. I think that all of us are thinking about it and worrying about it. I think the first thing is that it's okay to, like what we spoke about, be vulnerable and acknowledge that we have this fear, and to actually talk about it amongst ourselves, our children, asking our children, what are you afraid of? I mean, we will see what they're afraid of because they may have behaviors, but I think we need to be open and talk to them and share with them, like what you said, getting dressed, having a routine where you need to get up in the morning, eat your breakfast, and get out the door and get to school on time. You know how many children tell us that they're afraid they won't be able to sit in the classroom? How on earth am I going to sit for 8 hours in school when right now, every 30 minutes, I'm able to even shut my computer or walk around? They're very legitimate fears and worries. And I think the more we talk about it, the better it's going to be for our children. And I think we have to balance it with also getting ourselves out there and doing experiences and engaging and sort of getting a little bit slowly into certain routines even now that's going to help them transition when it comes to that time to get back to school.
And I also think that a common theme that we're speaking about, and something that we need to get the schools on board to as well, is to understand what co-regulation is. And that's a key component, because we don't know how the vaccinations are going to occur, what's going to happen in the fall if there's another lockdown, God forbid. Are we over with COVID? Are we not? There's no real data on this. The vaccine is out, schools will be open, but we don't know what the impact will be on the long term and what was going to happen. And also, like my sister mentioned, they have these issues. The teachers and the parents, I think the priority, if we want to get a practical tool or a takeaway, the focus should really be on learning how to co-regulate ourselves, that if there is a situation or if our children have behaviors that come as a result of this, that we're able to be in a physiological and psychological state that we can handle it. And that's where the self-care is very important. During this past year, my sister and I, we did a lot of community services for our nonprofit to support families. And my children, who you may have seen, were like in the background over there. My children watch their mother, who's very committed to them always, kind of not take care of herself a little bit and go a little bit to the extreme to help the community. Nothing wrong in that, by the way, because there was a short period of time I needed to do that. It was a great lesson for them because they saw how when issues come, you see that. But then there was a point where my health was not well. I was giving a course, and I think the next day I needed IV, right? You remember that? Like,
Yeah, I remember that.
we were so shut down, and I was like, what am I doing? I forget about my community. I won't be here for me, my family. And that was, and again, here I am, the expert and the pro, and I'm guiding everyone. And I allowed myself to get to that point. I stopped. I had to learn how to reset. And since that day, I have focused on my priority. And even though I want to do more service and to give more, if it impacts who I am and my physical well-being, it's going to impact my emotional state. It's going to impact my family. I won't be able to support my community. So I think that the lesson, the takeaway for us to understand how to deal with anxieties that may come up or the unknowns is to really not see of ourselves as selfish, but selfless. Like we're really doing this so that we can be there. Learning how to create a lot of consistency in our physical, emotional, and psychological health, I think will be okay. And again, we talk about quieting the noise a lot. Really taking time, whether it's movement, silence, meditation, journaling, running, dancing, whatever you need to take ownership to make sure to keep ourselves in that safe space.
And I just want to add, I think we should also be patient. I think we need to be patient with ourselves and with our children and know that it's a process. And just like we were thrown into COVID, we're slowly transitioning out of it, but you have to be patient and that you're going to have hard days and you're going to have days you're not going to want to go to school, you're not going to want to go to work, you're not going to want to, it doesn't mean you didn't do it right. It's just be patient and forgiving of yourself that you're not going to go back to normal maybe as, as quickly as what's important is to get back to it in a healthy way so you're emotionally and physically feeling good about it.
Yeah. Yeah. The patience thing, I always say that God is testing me with my patience every day of my life. I'm not there yet. I'm a work in progress, but I've improved. But it's been taking a lot of banging on my head to get to where I got.
I will tell you, as a witness and an observer, you seem to be a real good role model for all of us. So.
I agree.
Evelyn, I have one question about stroke before we wrap it up. I'm very curious about this because my husband had 2 strokes. The first stroke, he was affected in memory, the left side of his brain. And his second stroke, it was in the back of the brain, and he lost eyesight, top right vision. He doesn't have it. So I'm very curious, have you seen patients with these types of damages that started seeing again with time?
I think that I have to say this, the brain, and I'm saying as the general statement, but I'm saying it personally, is extremely, extremely plastic. And I think the more you engage and the more you work on things, it's amazing. I'll just give you a quick thing about a study that was done for children who were deaf and they couldn't hear. And when they did an MRI and they did certain tests on it, they saw that the part of their brain that wasn't for the ears was firing really quickly when they were presented with visual stimulation, which shows us that the brain will take over certain parts in order to take that stimulation. It's always looking to change and improve. It does not remain that way. Even if I found you had, mood is very important, like being able to have the right mindset and the belief even that things are going to change is so powerful that sometimes I found that when the work I did, and I was doing physical, I'm an OT, they would get like the emotional piece and the belief of being able to change creates those pathways. I almost feel like that's the fluid that needs to go in your brain for the actual movement of looking at something to regain your sight, because you're going to work on things like that. So I do believe that change can happen. I think there also you need a lot of patience. It's plastic, but you need the time. So I think it's a combination. If you have the motivation, you have the support, and you have the desire, I think unbelievable things can happen. And I saw it happening. I remember I worked with some patients. We had always patients. I was in acute care. So I was basically, most of my patients were, let's get them stable, get what they need to send them home. But we also had 25% of our caseload I had in the long-term care facility. So they were patients that maybe were going to go home, like when they were at a certain point, or some were not. And I remember I worked with this one patient who, it was, I think, 1 year and 2 months, and they had a stroke. And we got the patient to go home. It was slow but steady. Also had visual issues, had stuff with their arms. They were on one side of their body, they were hemiplegic. They were started walking again. They started doing things. Maybe it wasn't in the way that they 100% did it before, but they were able to get home and they were able to leave. And I remember they're like, that's all they wanted was to get out of the nursing home. I think it is doable. I think we just can never lose hope, and we have to keep going and get that support.
Yeah.
I also think, like with the manifestation that you're talking about, it's been proven that when we visualize the movements that we want to create, those pathways will actually be created,
Right.
even if we don't have that. So maybe working with someone, if what they need is they want to see, or the memory, for them to visualize that they are able to remember,
Yes.
even if they don't know what that implication is.
No, 100%. I heard a few telling stories that people told about themselves, how they focused on visualizing the cells regenerating. One was a spinal cord injury, and he was able to walk again. And the other one was something in the brain that he had. It wasn't a stroke, it was something else. And they worked on the entire day focusing on visualizing the cells regenerating. We were at the hospital after my husband's surgery, and we were talking to one of the doctors, and I asked, do you think the vision, is it possible to regain the vision back? And he said, no, this is gone. He'll never see again. So the doctor, we finished the conversation. He goes out. I look at my husband and I say, I choose to not believe, because he's not God. He's only a messenger. And all he's saying is that he himself, in the studies that he has read, he doesn't have the how to. But that's it. That's all he said. And that's all I told my husband, don't listen to what he said as fact. What it is it's his experience and the experience of what he has read. That's it.
I have a story for you, Mary, regarding vision. There is a producer in my neighborhood. He's actually nominated for the Miami Film Fest Awards and all that for his film. He's out there. He's won a Sundance. He's public about it. His name is Danny Finkelman, and he did not see out of his eyes until he was 7. But his parents were very, very much doing all the different research and the studies, and they kept telling him as a young person, because he had vision and then he lost his vision. They said, try and see the trees. Think of the photos of the flowers, or the photos that he remembered. And when he was 7, there was a moment where he started seeing shadows, and about a month or 2 later, his vision returned. The doctors said that it was gone, lost. He had not been seeing, and it did come back. Now, not everyone has this amazing story, but I will tell you that over and over again, that power of mind is so, so powerful. It does. Science has proven that we can do that. I mean, I don't know if you know about my birth story, where I gave birth in my sleep.
Yes.
Completely. So that was all based on the hypnobirthing concept, where I had never experienced. I had 2 other children, and I just woke up, and my body, by just visualizing what should happen, had done it on its own, because the power of the mind is so powerful that you're able to shift worlds. So it may be that annoying word, something that takes time and patience, but I think that it can, we're hopeful about these. We've seen it in children, we've seen it in adults. So we're optimistic about it.
And I'm a big proponent for science. If anyone knows us, we are very science-based. Like, everything has to have what's the reason? How does it work? But when you take science away, you look at an MRI and you look at, it's true, there are some things, okay, that you break a bone, it's broken, the bone, but the bone can regenerate and heal itself also. I feel like the power of the mind, the power of visualization, the power of belief that you can do something is so much more powerful. Think about old people who are God forbid they have cancer, and they get a diagnosis, and they say you're going to have 2 months, and they end up having years and years. What was that about when your doctor said that? What is that? Yes, there's signs, but there's so much more than that, and you have to. I feel you have to believe in that and not give up hope.
And I have
That's all
to
you
say
have,
that,
really.
yeah, as scientists, we talk about this all the time, that we're scientists, but we also understand that there's a whole level of healing that we even implement it. We don't talk about it too much, but there's a level of healing that we don't understand. There's a spirituality, there's a force, there's a higher purpose. We can't publish this, yet, but it will come to light. We have to realize that there's something that's outside of, we're limitless. We have no idea what the body and brain are capable of. It's just, by the way, it's just fascinating working with kids, working with the elderly, just working with humans and seeing the power of our bodies and minds. It's just, I can talk about this for hours. It's just very powerful.
No, it's amazing. I think that more and more people are writing about it. I've been reading a few books about it too. And just to give him that belief that he can see that when you see and you hear story after story, and you say, if it happened to them, it can happen to me, right?
There's a book by Dodge, The Brain That Changes Itself. You should definitely check that out. It will give you a lot of optimism on the hope. He speaks about stroke victims as well.
Oh,
So Norman Dodge, yes. I'll put that also in a link.
yeah, put that in the link together.
Sure.
Anybody who's here, if you have any questions, now is your time. I am so, so grateful. I know we spoke about doing this podcast a long time ago. You know that I want to catch you for a different type of a podcast where you tell us your story. One day that will happen.
One day. I'm taking a breath. I am a private person. I'm an extrovert, but I'm also a little bit, I don't know, maybe I'm like an ambivert. But but you did say something once to me that by sharing you're healing and helping. So that's ruminating here for me.
I have to tell you, and I can forward some messages because after I left the video on IGDT on Instagram this week, I've received messages from people, and I told them I left this message for you. I spoke for you. I didn't know it was for you, but it was for you. And then more people and people leaving me voice notes and telling me, I'm right now struggling with my health and I needed to hear the message that you gave me, that you said, it was for me, it was meant to be. One woman said, I was listening while I was driving and I was crying because I felt like you were talking to me. And it gives purpose to your pain. You feel so empowered because when you suffer in silence, when you go through something and you keep it to yourself, there are a lot of questions that comes up that are like, why did I have to suffer? Like, is this a punishment? Like, there's certain thoughts that we go over when we go through adversity, right? Because we think that it happened to me, right? Whatever it is that happened, whatever it is that I went through, it happened to me. But the moment that you use your story to help somebody else, it didn't happen to you. It happened through you.
Right.
For others, right? It's a gift for others. Your experience is a gift for others. And when you change and you shift that I'm going through adversity, this happened to me, to I am a messenger of it's coming through me, this message that can be helpful to somebody else. It goes from I'm broken to I'm powerful, I'm helpful, I'm giving, I'm kind. So it is much better to feel in that place where you're the giver than you are the one who's feeling broken and unwell. And I think that's why I open up. I'm definitely an introvert and I definitely very private. If you go through my Instagram account, you're not going to see my kids. Or what I cook. When I was doing plant-based, I was sharing what I was cooking. But other than that, you're not going to know what I eat because I eat crap most of the time. So I'm not going to share that. But
you are a special vessel here. You are definitely the messenger for many stories. I've been hearing the women and who've been on your podcast. It's It's amazing. And the other events that you have, the individuals, the speakers that you have, it's just powerful. You're really, you're a magnet for that.
Listening to you alone is powerful. That was so well to see pain and to shift the way it's thank you so much for sharing that.
No, thank you. Do you guys see how they are? That's
No.
how they're always like that. They make you feel great. I'm so grateful for your time. I know that you guys are busy.
Thank you for having us. It's our pleasure.
Sharing your wisdom. Everybody, Amy and Evelyn are a lot on Clubhouse. They have amazing people that join them in their rooms. Their group is Quiet the Noise. So go join the group. Go listen to them. They are there. You can get a lot of this and go in depth in specific subjects. And also, check them out on Instagram. Amy, send me later all of your links.
Okay.
This way people can follow you. And if anybody needs their services, their wisdom, you can connect with them directly. One thing that I love doing is being a connector. So always.
If you want to support our nonprofit, that is really our dream. We would like to get this rolling in the fullest way. And we're really trying to get these programs in place. And that's our dream.
Yeah.
So don't ever need us.
We usually don't, I don't sell or fundraise in any way in the group, but I want people to know about those opportunities because you never know, somebody may feel a real connection. So send all the links and we'll put it all there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. We went a little bit over time, but it was worth it. Happy Wednesday. And I will post the future shows and have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.